The humidity in my father's study was not just uncomfortable. It was oppressive, suffocating, and carried the scent of aged bourbon and approaching catastrophe. I stood near the window overlooking the overgrown garden, my laptop bag gripped in my hand like body armor. I wasn't watching the Spanish moss sway in the Charleston breeze. I was mapping escape routes, a reflex from my years in cybersecurity and digital forensics. The ability to scan an environment, identify the vulnerabilities, and plan your extraction before the system crashes. Tonight, the crash sat behind the mahogany desk that had once belonged to a successful man, typing frantically on his phone with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. My father, Edward Davis. Former tech executive. Current cautionary tale. The front door had not been kicked open. There were no shouted warnings, no Hollywood-style breach. The arrival of Sebastian Russo was far more chilling than any cinematic raid. It was surgical, silent, and absolute. He had simply walked in. The biometric security system my father had been so proud of hadn't even beeped. It had surrendered to whatever override codes Sebastian's team possessed, as if the technology itself recognized a superior predator. Now Sebastian Russo occupied my father's leather armchair, the one piece of furniture in the room that didn't speak of decline. He looked impossibly out of place. His suit was midnight black, cut with a kind of precision that made the faded wallpaper and water-stained ceiling of our plantation house look even more pathetic. He didn't look like a criminal. He looked like he belonged in a boardroom on Wall Street, or perhaps on the deck of a yacht in the Mediterranean, except for the atmosphere that surrounded him. It was arctic, compressed, dangerous. He had dark hair that curled slightly at the collar, styled with deliberate casualness, and his eyes were a shade of blue so dark they appeared almost black in the failing evening light, the kind of eyes that absorbed everything and revealed nothing. There were no visible scars, no broken knuckles, nothing to suggest he'd ever personally inflicted violence. That was what made him truly terrifying.
He had people for that.
Two men stood flanking the doorway, immobile, professional. They hadn't so much as glanced around the room since entering. Their focus was absolute, their presence a message. "Edward," Sebastian said. His voice was low, smooth, with just a hint of Italian inflection that made every word sound like something valuable. It was the tone of someone discussing a business merger, not a debt that could end with a body in the marsh. "We are past negotiations. The deadline was yesterday at noon." My father made a sound somewhere between a whimper and a cough. He grabbed at his collar, pulling at it as if his tie was choking him, though he hadn't worn a tie in months. "I know. God, I know, Mr. Russo. Please, you have to understand, it was the poker game at the harbor. I had a straight flush, I was so close. Just one more hand, and... Welcome back, everyone." Before we jump into today's story, if you're enjoying the content, hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. I've got another great story coming tomorrow that you won't want to miss. Alright, let's get started. "One more hand," Sebastian repeated, his voice devoid of inflection. "That's what you said 3 months ago. And 6 months before that. I'm not interested in your excuses, Edward. I'm interested in my $600,000. My father's face crumpled like wet paper. "I don't have it. I can't. There's nothing left. The house is mortgaged. The car is gone. Everything is." His voice broke completely. Sebastian's gaze shifted. It moved slowly, deliberately, until it landed on me. I felt the weight of that stare like a physical touch, clinical and assessing. He was cataloging my value the way I would scan a network for weaknesses. "Who is that?" Sebastian asked, not taking his eyes off me. My father turned, seeming to remember I existed only when someone else pointed it out. That's Kayla. My daughter. She helps with the accounts sometimes. She's good with computers and... Edward." Sebastian's voice cut through the babbling like a blade. "Do you have anything of value left, or are we done here?" The silence stretched for 3 heartbeats. 4. I watched my father's face cycle through denial, calculation, and finally, the most devastating emotion of all, relief. "I have her," my father whispered. "Kayla. She's brilliant. MIT graduate. Cybersecurity specialist. She can work for you. Whatever you need. Digital forensics, encryption, she knows systems inside and out. Something cold settled in my chest. Dad. She's yours, he continued, the words coming faster now, desperate and eager. Not as payment. As property. She can be whatever you need her to be. Just please. Wipe the debt clean. Sebastian stood. The movement was fluid, controlled, and somehow made the room feel smaller. He crossed the space between us, stopping directly in front of me. Up close, he smelled like expensive cologne and something darker, leather perhaps or gun oil. How old are you? He asked. 24. My voice came out steady. Good. And you understand cybersecurity? Digital systems? I specialize in penetration testing and financial crime investigation. I met his eyes, refusing to look away. I can break into most encrypted systems in under an hour. Something flickered in his expression. Interest, maybe. Or amusement at my directness. My father couldn't save me, he said. I continued, my voice low enough that only Sebastian could hear. So, what are the terms of this ownership, Mr. Russo? Sebastian's smile was slow, predatory, and somehow worse than any show of violence could have been. She's my property now, he said, loud enough for my father to hear. Not payment. Not collateral. Property. And I protect what belongs to me. He turned back to my father. The debt is transferred. You're free of your obligation to me, but if I ever see you again, Edward, the deal is void and the interest will be calculated in blood. Understood? My father nodded frantically, already reaching for his phone, probably planning his next bet. Get your things, Sebastian said to me. You have 10 minutes. I walked upstairs on autopilot, my mind already 3 steps ahead, calculating variables and outcomes. My room was sparse. I'd learned long ago not to get attached to things that could be sold or pawned. I grabbed my laptop bag, 3 encrypted hard drives, a change of clothes, and the only photo I cared about, me at my MIT graduation, before everything fell apart. 9 minutes. When I came back down, my father was gone. Of course he was. Sebastian gestured toward the door. This way. I expected a car. A black SUV with tinted windows, like in the movies. Instead, he led me down to the private dock behind the house, where a sleek cigarette boat waited, its engines already purring.
Get in, he said.
I climbed aboard, gripping my laptop bag like it was the only solid thing left in the world. One of Sebastian's men untied the moorings, and we pulled away from the dock, cutting through the dark water of the harbor with terrifying speed. The city lights of Charleston blurred past, replaced by the massive estates of the waterfront elite. We slowed as we approached a gated marina, and beyond it, a fortress of a mansion rose against the night sky, all glass and steel and ruthless modern architecture. Welcome home, Sebastian said, his voice carrying over the engine noise. I looked at the glowing fortress, then back at the receding lights of the city I was leaving behind. I traded drowning slowly for drowning in deep water, I thought. At least here, the view is better. Sebastian must have read something in my face, because his smile returned. Smart girl, he murmured. You're already calculating survival odds.
Good. You'll need that.
The boat docked with a gentle thud, and my new life began. The suite Sebastian assigned me was 3 times the size of my bedroom at home, all clean lines and neutral tones that probably cost more per square foot than my father's entire mortgage. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the harbor, and the bed looked like it had never been slept in. Everything was pristine, controlled, deliberate. I set my laptop bag on the desk and immediately began scanning for surveillance. It took less than 2 minutes to find the first camera, hidden in the smoke detector, professional grade, the kind that cost 5 figures. The second was in the air vent. The third, almost insultingly obvious, sat embedded in the television frame. I walked to the door and tested the handle.
Locked.
But when I examined the mechanism, something unexpected caught my attention. The bolt was on my side. I could lock him out. The realization was strange, unsettling in its implications. He was giving me the illusion of control, or perhaps acknowledging that a cage with a locked door was still a cage whether the key was inside or out. I opened my laptop and booted up, watching the network traffic immediately. His Wi-Fi was military-grade encrypted, which meant he either had someone very good on staff or he'd paid a fortune for corporate-level security. I spent an hour probing the edges, not trying to break in, just testing the parameters of my new digital prison. At exactly midnight, my laptop chimed. A message window appeared on my screen. Not from email, not from any application I had opened. It simply materialized. Impressive. Most people wouldn't have found the third camera. But you missed the one in the bathroom mirror. I typed back. I didn't miss it. I ignored it. There's a difference. Is there? The mirror camera has a blind spot near the shower. Amateur installation. The others are professionally placed. Someone on your team got lazy. 3 dots appeared, then my office.
Now.
I found him 2 floors down, in a room that looked more like a corporate command center than a traditional office. 6 monitors lined one wall, displaying what appeared to be security feeds, financial dashboards, and encrypted communication channels. Sebastian sat behind a glass desk, his jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that suggested he didn't just pay people to do violence. The bathroom camera will be removed by morning, he said without preamble. Sit. I sat. The rules are simple. You're available when I need you. You don't access external networks without permission. You don't communicate with anyone from your old life. Total discretion about anything you see or hear in this house. He slid a tablet across the desk. In exchange, you have freedom of movement within the estate, access to any resources you need for work, and privacy within reasonable limits. Reasonable limits, I repeated. Defined by you. Naturally. His gaze was steady, unreadable. You were testing my security tonight. Did you find what you were looking for? I found enough to know you have a competent team. The network architecture is solid, though there's a vulnerability in your southern perimeter router that I could exploit if I wanted to. Something that might have been amusement flickered across his face. And, do you want to? No, I said honestly. I want to understand the system I'm trapped in. It's what I do. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, studying me with that same clinical assessment from earlier. You're not what I expected. Neither are you. I stood. Are we done? For now. Back in my suite, I locked the door from the inside and opened my laptop. I spent the next hour creating a hidden partition, encrypted with a cipher I'd written myself in graduate school. It was small, only 5 gigabytes, but it was mine. The only space in this entire fortress that belonged to me alone. I named it Ghost and backed up every credential, every password, every piece of information that made me who I was before I became property. Then I lay down on the expensive bed in my beautiful cage and stared at the ceiling, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of my new prison, and began planning how to make myself indispensable enough that the locks would eventually open from the inside out. The panic started at 6 in the morning. I was already awake, working on refining my hidden partition, when I heard raised voices echoing through the hallway. Sebastian's office door slammed open hard enough that I felt the vibration through the floor. I found him surrounded by 3 men in expensive suits, all talking over each other, while Sebastian's face remained carved from stone. One of the monitors displayed a federal warrant, and I caught fragments of the conversation. FBI, servers 48 hours, encryption compromised. Shut up, Sebastian said quietly, and the room went silent. His gaze found me in the doorway. How fast can you assess a security breach? Depends on the complexity. What am I looking at? FBI raided our software company. They've got a warrant for our financial servers. My team says the encryption will break in 48 hours. He gestured to the youngest of the 3 men. Marcus has been handling our digital security. He's convinced we're finished. Marcus looked like he hadn't slept in days. The warrant includes a backdoor exploit. Once they're in, everything's exposed. Transactions, accounts, communications. We're talking 25 years minimum. I walked to the nearest terminal and pulled up the warrant documentation. The backdoor exploit was sophisticated, probably NSA-level tools that had been leaked and repurposed. But I'd seen similar architecture before, during my graduate research on federal cybercrime investigations. How long have I got? I asked. Sebastian checked his watch. 43 hours before they execute the decryption. Then get everyone out. I work alone. The office cleared in 30 seconds. Sebastian stayed by the door, watching as I pulled up the server architecture and began reverse engineering the FBI's backdoor. It took me 20 minutes to find it, a beautiful piece of work, honestly, embedded in a routine system update from 6 months ago. They'd been planning this for a while. I worked for 6 hours straight, barely aware of time passing. The backdoor had to be isolated without triggering any alerts on the federal side. Then I rebuilt the entire encryption schema from the ground up, layering in quantum-resistant algorithms that wouldn't exist in commercial software for another 5 years. By the time I finished, my eyes burned and my hands were shaking from the adrenaline crash. It's done, I said. The backdoor's neutralized. The new encryption is unbreakable with current technology. When they try to execute the warrant, they'll get nothing but corrupted data. Evidence inadmissible. Sebastian had been silent for hours. Now he moved to stand beside me, studying the screen. You just saved me from a federal conviction. I just saved your empire, I corrected. There's a difference. He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before. You can be property that sits in a room, or you can be the weapon that makes me untouchable. Chief Security Officer. Full access to operations. Which do you want? I met his eyes. I want my own workspace. Secure, no surveillance. 15% of all digital profits. And no monitoring of my systems, ever. 10%. 15. You just said I saved your empire. That's worth more than 10. Sebastian's smile was sharp, almost predatory. 15%. Your own server room. Complete autonomy over digital operations. He extended his hand. Welcome to the Empire, Kayla. I shook his hand, feeling the shift in power like a physical thing. I wasn't property anymore. I was an asset. And assets had negotiating power. The cage door had just opened a fraction. But I'd opened it myself. The black dress Sebastian had sent to my room was deceptively simple, silk that skimmed my frame without clinging, elegant enough for Charleston society, but understated enough that I wouldn't draw attention. That was the point, I realized. I was supposed to look innocent, unthreatening, decorative. Perfect camouflage for a weapon. The Charleston Yacht Club sat on the waterfront like a monument to old money, all white columns and polished teak. Sebastian's hand rested at the small of my back as we entered, a gesture that looked protective but felt like ownership. I cataloged faces, security positions, exit routes, old habits. Russo. A broad-shouldered man approached, his smile not reaching his eyes. Marco. I recognized him from the security feeds, Sebastian's lieutenant, in charge of port operations. Didn't know you were bringing a date. Kayla's my chief security officer, Sebastian said evenly. Marco's laugh was ugly.
Right.
Security. His gaze raked over me. That what we're calling the boss's toy now? Digital decoration? I felt Sebastian tense beside me, but I stepped forward before he could respond. Marco Tellini. You run the port operations, correct? Interesting side business you have with that cryptocurrency wallet. The one registered to your cousin in Miami. The color drained from Marco's face. What are you? Skimming approximately 8,000 per week through falsified shipping manifests. Routing it through Bitcoin, then converting to cash through 3 different exchanges. I pulled out my phone, tapped twice, and held up the screen showing transaction records. I have every transfer for the past 18 months. Would you like me to send this to Mr. Russo, or would you prefer to explain it yourself? Marco's hand moved toward his jacket. Sebastian's hand shot out faster, gripping Marco's wrist with enough force that I heard something crack. The room had gone silent, conversations dying as people turned to watch. You were saying something about decoration? Sebastian's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. Then he moved, sharp, efficient, brutal. Marco's jaw made a wet crunching sound as Sebastian's fist connected and the lieutenant crumpled. Sebastian looked around the room, his expression carved from ice. Kayla Davis is my partner. Chief Security Officer of all operations. She has my complete authority. He looked down at Marco, who was groaning on the polished floor. Marco, you're demoted to dock supervisor. Question her again, question me again, and you'll disappear for more than just the payroll. Understood. Marco managed a nod, blood streaming from his mouth. The reception continued as if nothing had happened. Old Money knew when to look away. Later, on Sebastian's yacht beneath a sky full of stars, he poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed me one. The Charleston harbor stretched around us, dark water reflecting city lights. You didn't have to defend me, I said. Yes, I did. He was quiet for a moment, staring at the water. My father was killed by the Valentino family when I was 19. They made it look like a heart attack, but I knew. I've spent 13 years building this empire, and I trust almost no one. He turned to face me. But you could have run when you cracked that FBI encryption. You could have copied everything and disappeared. You stayed. I negotiated 15%, I said. I'm not stupid. You stayed, he repeated, and then his hand was on my face, thumb tracing my jaw. The kiss was nothing like I expected. Not possessive or demanding, but almost tentative, as if he was asking permission. I kissed him back, tasting whiskey and something darker, understanding for the first time that we were both people who'd learned that trust was a weakness that got you killed. When we pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine. You're not property, Kayla. You never were. I know, I whispered. But thank you for finally seeing it. The Calhoun mansion glowed like a jewel box against the Charleston night, every window blazing with chandeliers that had witnessed 2 centuries of Southern secrets. The Preservation Society Gala was where old money congratulated itself for maintaining facades, which made it the perfect venue for people like Sebastian, and now, people like me. The cream silk dress I wore cost more than my MIT tuition. I blended perfectly with the Charleston elite, another polished surface, hiding what moved beneath. But unlike them, I was actually working. 3 legitimate cybersecurity consultants were in attendance, and I'd spent the past hour discussing federal compliance standards and encryption protocols, building a network that would make Sebastian's operations unassailable. I was heading back from the powder room when she materialized, Natasha Valentino, dripping in pearls and practiced concern. I recognized her from Sebastian's files. Victor Valentino's wife, and far more dangerous than her husband in the ways that mattered. Kayla Davis, she said, her smile warm and poisonous. I'm so glad I caught you alone. We need to talk about your father. My blood went cold. I don't have a father. That's unfortunate because Edward seems to think you do. He's been gambling at our establishment. Owes us $200,000. She tilted her head, studying me like a specimen. He claims he can pay. Says his daughter feeds him Sebastian Russo's shipping schedules, and that information is worth quite a bit to the right people. I kept my face blank, but my mind was already racing through attack vectors. That's impossible. I thought so too, until he showed us these. She pulled out her phone, swiped through screenshots of encrypted emails, my email address, detailed shipping manifests, timestamps that corresponded with actual movements of Sebastian's cargo. He's been selling your intel for months, darling. I thought you should know before this gets messy. I took her phone, my hands steady despite the fury building in my chest. The emails were expertly crafted, good enough to fool most people. But I'd written the encryption protocols on half of Charleston's secure networks. I knew what my own digital fingerprint looked like. Excuse me, I said and walked straight through the ballroom until I found Sebastian on the terrace, nursing a whiskey and discussing real estate with a state senator. I need you, I said quietly.
Now.
He read something in my face and excused himself immediately. I led him to a quiet alcove, pulled out my laptop from my clutch, never went anywhere without it, and connected to the mansion's guest network. Natasha Valentino just showed me these. I displayed the forged emails. Claims my father is selling your shipping schedules. That I'm his source. Sebastian's expression went deadly still. Are you? Look at the metadata. I pulled up the email headers, ran a trace on the encryption keys. The cipher is wrong. I use 4096-bit RSA with custom salting. This uses 2048-bit with default parameters. The IP addresses route through a VPN service I'd never touch, too many federal backdoors. And the timestamps don't match my system logs. I showed him the forensic evidence, building the case with the same precision I'd used to save him from the FBI. These emails are fabricated. Professional work, but fabricated. I looked up at him, and for the first time since that night in my father's study, I felt tears burning behind my eyes. I forced them back. He stopped being my father when he auctioned me like one of the antiques in this mansion. Now he's trying to get me killed by framing me as your leak. Sebastian's hand cupped my face, his touch gentle despite the rage I could see coiling behind his eyes. You came to me first. You didn't run, didn't hide. You brought me evidence. Because I choose this, I said. I choose you. I choose what we're building. His kiss was fierce, claiming, and I kissed him back with the same intensity, sealing my loyalty in a way words never could. When we pulled apart, his smile was cold and sharp. Let's go have a conversation with Natasha Valentino. Time to show her what happens when someone threatens my partner. Sebastian spent the next 2 days planning. War, he called it, though it looked more like chess, positioning assets, analyzing weaknesses, calculating casualties. I built digital fortresses around his operations while he prepared to burn the Valentinos to the ground. The encrypted message arrived at 3 a.m. My secure channel, the one only 3 people knew existed. I opened it on instinct, then froze. Kayla, they have me. Valentinos. Battery Mansion on East Bay. They'll kill me at dawn. Please. I know what I did. I know I don't deserve it. But I'm still your father. Come alone. Bring the decryption keys for Sebastian's accounts. It's the only thing they'll trade for my life. Please. The coordinates were attached. Military-grade encryption on the message itself. Someone who knew what they were doing had sent this. The old protective instinct kicked in before logic could stop it. That learned reflex from years of cleaning up Edward's messes. And underneath it, a darker curiosity. How did they get this encryption level? Who was their tech person? I told myself I was being tactical, gathering intelligence, understanding the enemy's capabilities. I told myself a lot of things as I grabbed my laptop and slipped out through the garden exit. The Battery Mansion loomed against the pre-dawn sky, one of Charleston's forgotten monuments, 3 stories of Georgian architecture slowly surrendering to time and neglect. The front door hung open like a mouth. No guards visible, but I knew they were there. I could feel the trap closing around me even as I walked inside. Edward sat in what had once been a grand parlor, zip-tied to a chair. Relief flooded his face when he saw me. Kayla, thank God. Do you have? She has everything we need. Victor Valentino emerged from the shadows, Natasha beside him, along with 3 men carrying weapons. One of them took my laptop before I could react, while another patted me down and removed my phone. I looked at my father. Really looked at him. His hands weren't bound tightly. I could see the circulation in his fingers. The zip tie was loose enough to slip. And he wouldn't meet my eyes. You brought me here, I said flatly. You sent the message. Edward's face crumpled. They said they promised if I brought you and the access codes, they'd forgive the debt. Give me $75,000. They said they'd just get the codes and let you go, I swear. You didn't sell me once, I interrupted, my voice colder than I'd ever heard it. You sold me twice. At least Sebastian was honest about what I was to him. He called me property and meant it. You called it love. I'm your father. No. The word came out with surgical precision. You stopped being my father when you auctioned me, like one of the antiques in this mansion. Now you're just a man who can't stop gambling, even when the stakes are someone else's life. Victor Valentino laughed. Touching. Now, about those encryption keys. The sound of engines cut through the dawn. Multiple vehicles moving fast. Victor's head snapped toward the windows. Sebastian's voice carried through the morning air, amplified and absolute. Valentino, You have 10 seconds to send her out, or I turn this mansion into a tomb. Victor's smile was vicious as he pulled a gun, pressing it to my temple. Or maybe I send her out in pieces. I looked at my father one last time. He was crying, begging, saying he was sorry. But all I felt was the cold certainty that some betrayals severed more than trust. They severed blood itself. You should have taken Sebastian's original deal, I told Victor quietly. Because what he does to you will be mercy compared to what I'm going to do to your digital empire when I get out of here. Victor's laugh was the last thing I heard before the windows exploded inward and the world became gunfire and chaos. They'd zip-tied me to a chair in what used to be the mansion's library, my laptop open in front of me. Victor stood behind me, gun pressed to the base of my skull. The crypto wallet keys.
Now.
I gave him false codes. The first set was close enough to pass initial verification but would trigger a lockout after 3 attempts. The second set was real keys, to a wallet I'd created last week containing exactly $47 in Bitcoin. Each code bought me minutes while they tested them. You're stalling, Victor said, cocking the gun. I'm cooperating, I replied evenly. Those systems have multiple authentication layers. If you rush, you trigger the security protocols. The windows exploded before he could respond. Glass rained down as Sebastian's team breached from 3 sides simultaneously. Victor jerked back, dragging me and the chair with him. My laptop skidded across the floor. Gunfire erupted. I threw my weight sideways, the chair crashing to the ground. My hands were still zip-tied behind me, but I could reach the laptop if I could just there. The hinge was cracked from the fall. I worked it back and forth until a piece of metal broke free, sharp and jagged. 30 seconds to cut through the plastic. Blood from where the makeshift blade cut my palm, but the ties gave way. I crawled to the laptop, which miraculously still worked. The battery mansion was old, but someone had installed a modern security system, cameras, electronic locks, motion sensors. Amateur installation, probably by the Valentinos. I could work with amateur. My fingers flew across the keyboard. Backdoor into the security system took 18 seconds. Then, I became the mansion itself. Doors that should have been locked clicked open for Sebastian's team. Doors that should have been open-locked, trapping Valentino's men in kill zones. I killed the lights in rooms where Sebastian needed darkness, flooded others with blinding brightness. Digital warfare. Physical war. Both were just systems waiting to be exploited. Sebastian appeared on the second-floor landing, moving like violence given form. A Valentino guard emerged from the hallway behind him, weapon raised. I screamed a warning. Sebastian spun, but not fast enough. The shot caught him high in the shoulder, spinning him backward. The guard pivoted toward me. His gun was rising when I grabbed the weapon that had fallen beside my chair. I didn't think. Didn't hesitate. Just aimed and fired 3 times, center mass, exactly like my defensive pistol instructor had taught me 5 years ago. The guard dropped. I'd killed someone. The knowledge sat in my chest like ice, but there was no room for processing it. Not yet. I ran to Sebastian, who was already pushing himself up despite the blood soaking his shirt. I'm fine, he growled. Where's Victor? The gunfire was dying down. Victor's operation had been thorough, but not prepared for Sebastian's surgical precision. I heard someone shouting clear from the first floor. Victor Valentino died in the library where I'd been held, Sebastian's team catching him trying to escape through a servant's passage. Natasha they found in the basement, surrounded by paper documents, evidence she'd been planning to destroy. I immediately secured every device, every hard drive. The digital trail I'd uncovered would ensure federal charges that made Sebastian's empire look like jaywalking. The sun was rising when Sebastian found me standing over my father. Edward was still zip-tied, still sobbing, having watched the entire siege from his front row seat. Sebastian handed me his weapon without a word. Your ghost. Your choice. I looked at the gun, then at the man who'd given birth to me and taught me that love was just another word for transaction. I could end it here. No one would question it. Instead, I set the gun down and pulled out my phone. I'm sending you to Nevada. There's a facility in the desert, very remote, very secure. No internet. No computers. No phones. For the next 10 years, you'll work manual labor and remember what it's like to exist without the technology you sold your daughter to protect. I met his eyes. For a man who gambled everything on digital systems, that's a worse fate than a bullet. Sebastian's hand found my shoulder. Exile to the desert. I like it. I thought you would, I said, and walked away from my father for the last time. Sebastian refused the hospital. Too many questions, he said, though I suspected it was more about control, needing to bleed in his own fortress rather than surrender to sterile rooms and federal reporting requirements. I cleaned the wound in his bathroom, hands steady despite the adrenaline still coursing through my system. The bullet had passed through cleanly, missing bone and major vessels. My wilderness first aid certification from a paranoid phase in grad school was finally proving useful. You stayed, Sebastian said quietly as I sutured the entry wound. You could have run during the firefight. Disappeared. I stayed. I confirmed, not looking up from my work. Because I choose this. I choose you. His hand caught mine, bloody and shaking. I love you. I need you to know that before. I kissed him to stop the words, tasting copper and smoke and something that felt like coming home to a place I'd been searching for without knowing it existed. When I pulled back, I met his eyes. I love you too. Not because you own me, because you see me. We made love slowly, carefully, mapping each other with touches that claimed and surrendered in equal measure. Not possession. Partnership. Two people who'd learned that trust was terrifying, choosing to be terrified together. Morning brought clarity. I dressed in a black blazer and silk blouse, professional armor for what came next. Sebastian's organization filled the boardroom, 12 men who'd built an empire through violence and calculation. They looked at me with varying degrees of skepticism until I connected my laptop to the main screen. The Valentino assets total approximately 47 million in cryptocurrency. I began, displaying wallet addresses and transaction histories. I already have the access codes. We'll seize everything within the hour. I advanced the slide. But more importantly, we're going to restructure this entire operation. I laid it out with surgical precision. A legitimate cybersecurity firm, Davis Russo Security Solutions. Federal contracts for infrastructure protection. State government consulting. Every dollar of Sebastian's empire laundered through legal, protected channels. The criminal network would become consultants. The smuggling routes would become supply chains. The violence would become obsolete because we'd own the systems that made violence unnecessary. You're asking us to go legitimate, one of the older lieutenants said. I'm telling you how to become untouchable, I corrected. The FBI can't investigate what doesn't exist. They can't seize assets that are protected by federal contracts. You'll make more money, take less risk, and build something that lasts beyond the next turf war. Sebastian leaned back in his chair, pride evident in his expression. Questions? There were none. Respect earned in blood and code was absolute. 6 months later, Davis Russo Security Solutions occupied 3 floors of a renovated warehouse on the waterfront. Forbes had featured me in their 30 Under 30 issue. Our contracts with the Department of Defense and 3 state governments were worth over $200 million. Charleston's premier cybersecurity firm, they called us. I stood in my corner office, watching the harbor where Sebastian's yacht was moored, and thought about the night I'd been traded like property. That girl would barely recognize the woman I'd become, chief technology officer of a thriving empire, partner to a man who'd stopped being a criminal and started being a king. My phone buzzed. Sebastian's text was simple. Dinner on the yacht? I have something to show you. I smiled and replied, on my way. The cage had become a kingdom, and I'd built it myself. The grand opening of our new corporate headquarters was everything a Forbes feature story promised. Glass and steel architecture overlooking the Charleston harbor, 200 guests representing government contracts and Fortune 500 companies, and me in a tailored Navy suit that cost more than my father's entire wardrobe once had. Tech Visionaries Under 30, the magazine had called me. The article mentioned my MIT credentials, my innovative approach to quantum encryption, and my partnership with Sebastian Russo in building Charleston's premier cybersecurity firm. It didn't mention how I'd gotten here. Some systems were better left unexamined. As the last guest departed and the catering staff cleaned up, Sebastian found me on the rooftop terrace. "Walk with me," he said, gesturing toward the private dock where his yacht waited. We cruised out into the harbor as the sun painted the sky in shades of amber and crimson. Sebastian poured 2 glasses of whiskey, then pulled out an encrypted tablet. "I want to show you something." The document that appeared on screen made my breath catch. The original contract. The one my father had signed, transferring ownership of me like I was furniture or livestock. Every clause was there: indefinite term, complete authority, total discretion. "I've carried this for 6 months, Sebastian said quietly. Encrypted, backed up in 3 separate secure locations. I told myself it was insurance, protection if things went wrong.
He met my eyes.
But that's a lie. I kept it because I was afraid that if I deleted it, you'd realize you could leave. I started to speak, but he held up a hand. "Watch." He opened the security settings, disabled every backup protocol, and then, with deliberate finality, deleted the file, wiped the cache, purged the encryption keys. The contract disappeared as if it had never existed. "You're free, Kayla. Completely free." He pulled up a Bitcoin wallet containing exactly $10 million. "This is yours. Plus startup funding for any venture you want. Recommendations to any company in the world. You can walk off this yacht and build whatever future you choose." His voice was steady, but I saw the fear behind his eyes. "You were never property. You were my reckoning. But you deserve to code your own future." I took the tablet from his hands and set it aside. Then I opened my laptop, because of course I'd brought it, and created a new document in our shared encrypted drive. The one we both controlled, where neither of us had override authority. "New contract," I said, typing as I spoke. "Equal partnership. 51% control of technology operations for me. 51% control of business operations for you. Shared equity in all assets. Legal operations only. We've legitimized this empire, and we keep it that way." Sebastian moved behind me, reading over my shoulder as I continued. "Marriage proposal rights reserved exclusively for Kayla Davis, to be exercised at her sole discretion." I turned to face him. "I was never your property, Sebastian. But I choose to be your partner. I choose the system we built together. I choose you, not because you own me or because I owe you. Because you're the only person who ever looked at me and saw a weapon, a partner, and a woman worth fighting beside." His kiss was answer enough. When we pulled apart, he pressed his thumb to the biometric scanner on my laptop, signing the contract. I did the same. "Welcome to the Empire, partner," he murmured against my lips. Later, as Charleston's lights glittered across the dark water, we sat side by side reviewing encrypted operations files. Davis Russo Security Solutions had contracts in 12 countries now. The empire we'd built was protected, legitimate, and thriving. 2 people who'd learned that trust was a weapon had chosen to wield it together. I'd been traded as property once. Tonight, I'd chosen my own fate. The hacker had finally found a system worth joining, one she'd coded herself. And that's the end of today's story. Now I want to hear from you. Was Kayla's final choice true freedom, or just a different kind of cage? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that subscribe button, give it a like, and share it with someone who loves a good story. Tomorrow brings another journey you won't want to miss. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.